War Robots. It was a childhood game of mine, just like many other mobile games back in the day. Originally releasing in April of 2014, the game had just come out as a miniature shell of what it would later become in the future. With not many features, one game mode, and just a handful of robots and weapons. It was a simple but fun game. Then, in 2016, an increasing amount of content would begin to be added each year. But honestly, that increase in content only made the game more fun, until the year 2020, when everything would start to crumble down. Hello everyone, Spade here. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why War Robots went from a promising and amazing game to one of the biggest failures in mobile gaming history. Let's start from the beginning. War Robots was a simple game at first. It released at a time when mobile gaming was just starting to go mainstream, and launched as a fun game where you'd head into a battlefield with your hangar of 5 robots. You'd try to capture beacons and eliminate as many enemy players as possible. There weren't many robots or weapons available at launch, so your options when building your hangar were quite limited. It was a great idea, a solid foundation that had real potential to evolve into something even greater, especially in the context of the just sprouting mobile game market back then. The original designs of the bots were very simple, and the gameplay was easy to understand. Abilities weren't very prominent at the time, so the most you had to do was shoot and strategically maneuver around the battlefield. Skill mattered more than anything, because everyone essentially had the same gear and damage. It was all about how well you could use your robots. Moving on to 2015, developers started experimenting with new possibilities and expanding the game, adding new maps, more diverse robots and weapons, and new in-game mechanics like energy shields and stealth. Around this time, they also introduced new features such as the workshop, where you could create parts for new robots. From 2016 to 2018, the game thrived, growing steadily and introducing many new robots, weapons, and major features, such as events, more maps, clans, and the black market, which was essentially just gambling. It was a not-so-subtle monetization attempt on Pixonic's part, but compared to what would come later, the monetization in War Robots during this era was still relatively tame. Black market wasn't the worst feature ever, but what it would pave the way for would eventually become the very thing that killed War Robots. But we'll get to that a bit later. For now, let's move into the 2019 era of the game. 2019 brought in many new robots and weapons as usual, but this year was different. Not only were many of the new robots significantly more dominant in the meta than older ones, but pilots were also introduced, marking the start of ridiculously overcomplicated power scaling. War Robots already had multiple layers of mechanics that could boost a robot's power, modules, abilities, and the robots themselves. On their own, these power additions weren't too problematic, and the game was still relatively balanced up until this point. But once pilots were added, everything changed. Suddenly, there were even more buffs and abilities, and complex combinations being added, something the game definitely did not need. All these layers of power just inflated the strength of robots to absurd levels, and it only got worse from there. From 2019 to 2020, another major feature was added: Titans. Titans were basically giant overpowered robots that required a meter to charge up, and were way more expensive than regular robots. They were insanely strong, and if you didn't have one, you basically couldn't compete. It was just another massive factor to consider when building your hangar, meaning more complication for players and more money for Pixonic. I'd say 2019 was when Pixonic's greed really started to take over, and they began aggressively pushing new monetization strategies. In 2020, drones were added, yet another feature players had to worry about when building their setups. And these drones, they were insanely overpowered for their size. Not to mention they were also ridiculously expensive to level up. And if you wanted to get actual value from them, you pretty much had to upgrade them to at least level 8. This is where things started to go downhill fast for War Robots. And believe me, it went down very, very fast. 2021 to 2023 era could only be described as a complete disaster. Every update brought in increasingly powerful robots and weapons, while older ones were constantly nerfed into the ground. This forced players to buy the new equipment to stay competitive. and Pixonic's strategy became painfully obvious. It was all about milking money from their fan base with every new patch. The cycle never stopped. In fact, the lifespan of equipment was getting shorter and shorter, as old gear was rendered useless faster than ever before. This effective scam made the game incredibly hard for free-to-play players, especially with how little Pixonic offered in terms for rewards for non-spenders. On top of that, Pixonic started flooding the game with over 20 offers every time you loaded it up, making it crystal clear how deep their greed ran. And they weren't done yet, not even close. More power levels were added during this time, such as motherships and ultimate weapons, which monetized the game even further and made it even more convoluted and frustrating to play. And then came 2024, what is, in my opinion, the worst year in War Robot's history. The same cycle of nerfing old gear and releasing new overpowered content kept repeating, but this time even more aggressively. Pixonic doubled down on monetization, pushing the game further into a downward spiral. Most of the player base had caught on by this time, and people began quitting in massive numbers, finally realizing how exploitative the game had become. And Pixonic has done absolutely nothing to fix or improve the experience. They've just kept pushing it further towards oblivion. At this rate, I do not see the game lasting much longer. War Robots has become a depressing husk of what it once was, and it honestly feels like developers are just trying to milk it dry before abandoning it completely. War Robots, what happened to you? It was once one of the best games in all of mobile gaming, entertaining millions of fans around the globe. It was such a good game too, and most importantly, it was fun for everyone. Pixonic had a gem in their hands, and all that greedy company ended up doing was just driving it into the ground and draining it for all it's worth. Nowadays, War Robots is just a decaying shell of what it once was. It's long past its prime, and things will only get worse from here. Not to mention the fact that many influential content creators like Manny Gaming and AD Gaming, who essentially built War Robots' popularity, have left the community due to Pixonic's countless grievances. And to top it off, there are many new and better games being released in the same genre as War Robots that honestly feel so much better. One example, and probably the best one I've seen, is Armor Attack. Armor Attack is a recently released robot shooter that I have been playing a lot in my spare time. It's just a really good and fun game, proving that it's still possible to create amazing mobile experiences like War Robots once was. Pixonic completely fumbled the bag. Excessive monetization kills video games, and War Robots is a prime example. And speaking of that topic, let's be real here. War Robots is not the only casualty. It's part of a much bigger problem: the slow and painful death of mobile gaming across the board. Games today aren't even built for fun. They're built to trap players into spending money. Most mobile games are low-effort cash grabs, flooded with ads, paywalls, manipulative gotcha systems, and predatory monetization strategies. You can't play for 5 minutes without being bombarded with ads or offers. Let's take Pixel Gun 3D for an example, another game that used to thrive on creativity and good shooter gameplay. That's now just another over-monetized mess. Weapons are overpriced, the matchmaking is broken, and everything is designed to push players into paying more. Even Supercell, one of the kings of mobile gaming, is slipping hard. Clash Royale has turned into a toxic grind of pay-to-win champions, power creep, and zero balance for free-to-play players. And even Brawl Stars, which actually had a resurgence recently, is starting to follow the same path. Shiny new skins, battle passes, and nothing but monetization at its core. And it's not just old titles either. Even new games like Call of Duty Mobile and PUBG are infected with battle passes, loot crates, and overpriced cosmetics. Mobile games are no longer driven by passion or innovation. They're driven by profit margins and psychological manipulation. As of 2024, over 70% of the top mobile games generate most of their income from ads and microtransactions, not from actual content. And that's not a coincidence. It's a system that's designed to turn every player into a spender. The mobile gaming industry is collapsing under its own greed, and the saddest part, most players don't even realize until it's too late. War Robots is just the tip of the iceberg, and the entire ocean of mobile games is rotting underneath it. Anyways, if you all enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, notifications on, as I will be posting many different high quality videos like this in the future that will all be on different various interesting topics. If you have any differing opinions or anything to say, feel free to leave a comment underneath this video. And with that being said, this video is officially finished. Peace out, everybody.